The screen of my phone glowed in the dimly lit auditorium. My fingers trembled as I read the text message that had just arrived from my mother. Lauren, we've combined your graduation dinner with Emma's promotion celebration. Don't forget to bring your credit card for the final payment. See you tonight. The Wharton Business School auditorium buzzed with excitement around me. Proud families clutched bouquets of flowers. Camera flashes captured beaming graduates in their caps and gowns. Parents embraced their children with tears of pride shimmering in their eyes. But I stood alone, my MBA diploma heavy in my hands, its gold embossing catching the light but failing to warm the cold emptiness spreading through my chest. 27 years old, a degree from one of the most prestigious business schools in the country, and not a single family member had bothered to attend the ceremony. My achievement had once again been reduced to an inconvenience, something to be rushed through and combined with my younger sister's moment. Even worse, I was expected to pay for the privilege of having my accomplishment overshadowed. My fingers instinctively found the simple silver bracelet on my wrist, the only piece of jewelry I wore that day. My grandmother had pressed it into my palm before she passed away 5 years ago. "Remember your worth, Lauren," she had whispered. "It comes from within, not from anyone else's recognition." I traced the delicate links, each one representing a promise I had made to myself, but had repeatedly broken by seeking approval, where it would never be given. I slipped my phone into my pocket and painted on a smile as my classmate Jessica approached her family, trailing behind her like a constellation of admirers. "Lauren, we did it!" She pulled me into an enthusiastic hug, her family beaming at us. "My parents are taking us all to celebrate. Please join us." Before I could answer, her mother stepped forward and squeezed my arm. "We're so proud of you both. Your speech at the business competition last year was brilliant. You have such a future ahead of you." The warmth of their recognition washed over me, simultaneously comforting and painful. How easily this stranger could see value in me when my own family never had. I thanked them, but declined explaining I had my own celebration planned. The words tasted bitter as they left my lips. My own celebration. A dinner I had carefully arranged at Le Méridien, an upscale restaurant in downtown Philadelphia, now commandeered to honor my sister Emma's promotion. As Jessica and her family departed, their joyful chatter faded into the ambient noise of the auditorium. I remained rooted to the spot, my mind drifting backward through time scenes from my childhood, floating up like autumn leaves caught in a sudden gust of wind. I was 7 years old, standing on the stage at Westview Elementary School, clutching a certificate for the highest academic achievement in my grade. My eyes scanned the audience, row after row of unfamiliar faces, searching for my parents, who had promised to be there. They never arrived. Later that night, I learned they had attended Emma's first ballet recital instead. My mother stroked my hair absently as she gushed about how naturally talented Emma was, how the dance instructor had singled her out for praise. "She reminds me so much of myself at that age," my mother had said, a faraway look in her eyes. Before the injury. That was the first time I learned about my mother's past as a gymnast with Olympic potential. A bad fall had shattered both her dreams and her left ankle. When 5-year-old Emma had shown natural grace and balance, my mother had immediately enrolled her in dance classes, her eyes alight with a fervor I never saw directed at my academic achievements. The memory dissolved, replaced by another, my high school graduation, valedictorian, my speech carefully prepared and practiced for weeks. The audience had applauded enthusiastically, but the seats reserved for my family remained conspicuously empty. They had called an hour before the ceremony to explain that Emma had an unexpected dance audition for a prestigious summer program. Their absence was explained away as necessity, but the message was clear: Emma's possibilities would always outweigh my achievements. I blinked, returning to the present moment as the auditorium began to empty. Outside, the Philadelphia spring sunshine spilled across the campus, illuminating the historic buildings of Wharton. I shouldered my bag and walked slowly toward my apartment, each step heavy with the weight of my thoughts. My phone buzzed again. Emma, this time. "Mom says you're paying for dinner tonight. Also, I invited some people from work. Hope that's cool." I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, pedestrians flowing around me like water around a stone. The familiar feeling of invisibility crept up my spine. For months, I had been planning this dinner. I had created a spreadsheet detailing every aspect: the menu selections, the wine pairings, the floral arrangements. I had sent elegant invitations to my closest friends, to colleagues who had supported me, and to professors who had guided me through the rigorous MBA program. And I had invited my family, hoping against hope that just once they might acknowledge what I had accomplished. That they might see me, truly see me, for the dedicated, hardworking person I was, instead of merely as Emma's bookish older sister. I pushed open the door to my apartment, the quiet interior, a stark contrast to the chaos of emotions churning inside me. The space was modest, but meticulously organized. In the corner of my living room stood a small bookshelf containing the journals I had kept since childhood. On the top shelf sat an old, worn notebook, its cover faded from handling. I pulled it down, my fingers automatically finding the page marked by a thin ribbon. An entry from when I was 15. One day they will see me, not as Emma's sister, not as the reliable one, but as Lauren. And it will be too late for them to claim any part of what I've become. I closed the journal and placed it back on the shelf. Those words written by a hurt teenager now echoed with prophetic power. Because today was the day I would finally make myself seen, even if I had to tear apart everything to do it. My phone rang, jolting me from my thoughts. The screen displayed the name of Le Méridien restaurant. I answered, my voice steadier than I expected. Miss Winters, this is Antoine from Le Méridien. I'm calling to confirm the final details for your event tomorrow evening. Yes, Antoine, what can I help you with? There was a brief pause. Just to confirm, this is a combined celebration for your MBA graduation and your sister Emma's promotion, correct? The world seemed to stop spinning. The careful control I had maintained began to crack. What did you just say? My voice emerged as barely more than a whisper. Your family contacted us yesterday to update the reservation details. They said it would now be a joint celebration. We assumed you were aware. The guest count has been increased to accommodate additional attendees from your sister's workplace. The room around me blurred. A combined celebration, without consulting me, without even the courtesy of informing me. And I was still expected to pay for it all. Miss Winters, are you there? I never agreed to this. I said each word precise and sharp. This dinner was supposed to be for my graduation. I was the one who made the reservation. I signed the contract. I paid the deposit. I understand, Miss Winters. However, as the contract allows for modifications up to 48 hours before the event, and the call came from the contact number you provided as an alternate, we proceeded with the changes. Would you like me to read through the modifications that were requested? No, I said, the single syllable heavy with defeat. Thank you for calling. I ended the call and stood motionless in the center of my living room. The familiar feeling of erasure washed over me, that sensation of being slowly removed from my own narrative pixel by pixel, until nothing remained but a faint outline where I should have been. My hands trembled as I dialed my parents' number. Each ring seemed to amplify the pounding of my heart. My mother answered on the third ring, her voice casual and unconcerned. Lauren, what a surprise! Is everything okay? I inhaled deeply, fighting for calm. Mom, the restaurant just called me. They said my graduation dinner has been changed to include Emma's promotion. Did you do this? The sound of dishes clinking came through the phone, domestic normalcy continuing uninterrupted. Oh yes, I thought it would be more efficient to combine the celebrations. Emma just got promoted to assistant marketing manager, which is quite an achievement. And she has so many colleagues she wants to invite. This way we save on rental fees and catering. You don't mind, do you? Efficient. The word echoed in my mind. My graduation from an elite MBA program reduced to a matter of efficiency, a cost-saving measure, something to be bundled with another event to maximize value. Mom, I began, struggling to keep my voice steady. This dinner was supposed to be for my graduation. I've been planning it for months. I just wanted one evening that was about my accomplishment. Before I could continue, my father's voice broke in, his tone dismissive and edged with impatience. Lauren, you should be grateful. Restaurants like Le Méridien aren't easy to book. You've always been good with books and studying, but you've never had Emma's social skills. Having her there will liven up the event. Her colleagues will make the party feel more festive. What's the problem? His words struck with precision, targeting insecurities he had helped plant years ago. The implication that I was boring, that my achievements were somehow less vibrant, less worthy of celebration than my sister's social popularity. The problem, I said, my voice trembling slightly, is that this was supposed to be my evening, my graduation, my moment. A third voice joined the call. Emma. Her tone carried the casual confidence of someone who has never questioned their place in the world. Come on, Lauren, don't be so dramatic. Yes, you studied hard and got your MBA. Everyone knows that. But you've never known how to throw a good party. Your guests would be bored listening to you talk about business strategies all night. With me there, it'll be fun. I know how to make people comfortable. You should be thanking me. Otherwise, your friends might leave early. The casual cruelty of her words rendered me momentarily speechless. In Emma's worldview, my academic achievement was merely a dry footnote, while her social skills were the real commodity of value. The fact that I had worked 3 jobs to put myself through school while she had received continuous financial support from our parents went unacknowledged as always. I understand, I said finally, the words hollow. Thank you for clarifying. I ended the call before they could respond. Setting the phone down on the coffee table, I noticed my knuckles had turned white from gripping it so tightly. The familiar weight of disappointment settled in my chest, but this time something else accompanied it. A spark of resolve, small but intensely hot, like the beginning of a wildfire. I moved to my desk and pulled open the bottom drawer. Inside lay a thick, leather-bound notebook. Unlike my journals, this book contained no emotional outpourings, no teenage angst. Instead, its pages were filled with meticulous records, dates, dollar amounts, account numbers. Every penny I had given to my family over the years. College tuition for Emma when my father's business temporarily failed. Medical bills for my mother's recurring ankle problems. Property tax payments when they fell behind. A loan for my father to restart his consulting practice. None of it ever acknowledged. None of it ever repaid. All of it forgotten or minimized in family lore. I flipped through the pages, years of financial support documented in my precise handwriting. The total at the bottom of the final page was substantial enough to have funded a down payment on a house. Instead, it had disappeared into the black hole of my family's needs, while I lived in a modest apartment and continued to pay off my student loans. A plan began to form in my mind. Not a plan of revenge, but of reclamation, of finally claiming the space that had always been denied to me. I reached for my phone again, but this time I dialed a different number. The Riverview Bistro was a small restaurant alongside the Delaware River. Less prestigious than Le Méridien, perhaps, but with excellent food and an intimate atmosphere. Hello, I'd like to make a reservation for tomorrow evening. A private dinner for 12 people. Yes, it's a special occasion, a graduation celebration. As I finalized the details for my true graduation dinner, one that would be untouched by my family's interference, a sense of calm determination settled over me. I would attend the dinner at Le Méridien, the one that had been commandeered and transformed. I would smile and be gracious. I would watch as Emma commanded attention, and my achievement was relegated to a footnote in the evening's proceedings. But before that, I would celebrate on my terms, surrounded by people who truly saw me, people who valued not just what I could provide, but who I was. I sent text messages to a carefully selected group, my closest friends from the MBA program, 2 professors who had been particularly supportive, and colleagues from my internship who had become trusted allies. The message was simple. Before the official dinner tomorrow, I'm hosting a small private celebration at Riverview Bistro at 5 p.m. This is the real graduation dinner. I hope you can join me. The responses came quickly. Everyone accepted. No one questioned why I was hosting 2 events. Perhaps they already understood more than I had given them credit for. I moved to the window of my apartment, looking out at the Philadelphia skyline as twilight began to descend. The city lights blinked on one by one stars of human making that illuminated the gathering darkness. For years, I had lived in the shadow of my sister's brightness. I had accepted the role assigned to me, the reliable one, the invisible support, the backdrop against which others could shine. I had convinced myself that if I just worked harder, achieved more, someday my family would finally see me, finally value me. But tomorrow I would step out of that shadow, not with dramatic declarations or emotional confrontations, but by simply claiming my own space in the world, by creating a moment that belongs solely to me. I touched the silver bracelet on my wrist, my grandmother's final gift. She had seen me when no one else did, had recognized something in me that my parents had always overlooked. Remember your worth, Lauren, I whispered to myself, echoing her words from years ago. It comes from within, not from anyone else's recognition. Morning arrived with the soft persistence of spring sunshine filtering through my curtains. I had slept fitfully, my dreams a chaotic blend of past disappointments and anxiety about the day ahead. But as I moved through my apartment preparing for the day, a strange calm settled over me. Today would be different. Today I would be different. I dressed carefully for my graduation dinner, my real one. A deep blue dress that complemented my eyes professional but with an elegance that felt special. I styled my hair in loose waves and added my grandmother's bracelet, the silver catching the light as I moved. The Riverview Bistro glowed with warm light as I approached. Through the windows, I could already see some of my guests had arrived. Professor Jenkins, who had guided my thesis research with unwavering support. Jessica and Michael from my study group, who had spent countless late nights helping me prepare for exams when family emergencies had pulled me away from class. Real emergencies, not the manufactured crises my family often created to command my attention and resources. I paused outside, taking a moment to absorb the significance of what I was doing. For the first time in my life, I was creating a celebration that was truly mine. Not seeking approval, not trying to be seen, but simply honoring my own achievement in the company of people who already saw me clearly. As I pushed open the door, warmth enveloped me, both the physical warmth of the restaurant and the emotional warmth of genuine smiles turning my way. Professor Jenkins rose immediately, raising a glass in my direction. Here she is, the woman of the hour, Lauren Winters, MBA extraordinaire and future business leader. A round of applause rippled through the small gathering. No forced enthusiasm, no conditional approval, just authentic recognition. They had saved a seat for me at the head of the table, a position of honor I would never have been granted at my family's event. As I took my place, a server appeared with champagne filling glasses around the table. Jessica leaned close, her eyes bright with genuine happiness for me. "We're so proud of you, Lauren. You worked harder than anyone I know to earn this degree." "Speech," called Michael from across the table, raising his glass with a grin. I stood, champagne flute in hand, looking at the circle of faces that represented the community I had built for myself. People who had chosen to be in my life, who valued my contributions and supported my ambitions. Thank you all for coming today. This means more to me than you can possibly know. For as long as I can remember, I've measured my worth by whether others could see it. I've worked and sacrificed, hoping that eventually I would do enough to be truly seen. I paused, emotion threatening to overwhelm me. But being here with all of you, I realized that I've been seen all along, just not by the people I was trying so hard to impress. Professor Jenkins raised his glass higher. "To Lauren, brilliant, determined, and far too modest about her exceptional talents. To Lauren." The chorus of voices rang out, surrounding me with the acknowledgement I had craved for so long. As we dined on exquisite food and shared stories and laughter, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The heavy mantle of family expectation and disappointment seemed less substantial here in the space I had created for myself. When the meal ended and final embraces were exchanged, I found myself reluctant to leave. In a few hours, I would need to change clothes and head to Le Méridien for the official celebration, the one where I would once again be pushed to the periphery of my own accomplishment. But as I stood on the riverside terrace of the bistro, watching the water flow past, I realized something fundamental had shifted inside me. I was no longer desperate for my family's approval. I was no longer willing to disappear from the story of my own life. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Don't forget to arrive at Le Méridien by 7:30. Emma wants to make an entrance at 8 with her work friends. Wear something appropriate." I slipped the phone back into my purse without responding. Tonight at the combined celebration, I would be present. I would be polite, but I would no longer be invisible. I had claimed my moment, created my memory. And no matter what happened at Le Méridien, no one could take that away from me. As I walked back to my apartment to prepare for the evening ahead, I touched my grandmother's bracelet once more. The small ritual had become a talisman of sorts, a reminder of my intrinsic value separate from my family's acknowledgement. The real test still lay ahead. But for the first time, I was ready to face my family not as the perpetually disappointing daughter seeking approval, but as Lauren Winters, MBA graduate, a woman who had finally learned to see herself clearly with or without their validation. Standing in Shadows. Part 2. The golden hour light streamed through the windows of Riverview Bistro, casting everyone in a warm glow as I said my goodbyes. My real graduation celebration had been everything I'd hoped for: intimate, meaningful, filled with genuine congratulations and heartfelt conversations. Professor Jenkins had raised his glass one final time, before departing, his eyes crinkling with pride. "You're going to change the world, Lauren. I've known it since your first day in my class." His words lingered with me as I walked the short distance back to my apartment. The comfortable weight of authentic recognition wrapped around me like a protective cloak. For those 2 precious hours, I had experienced what it felt like to be truly seen, not as Emma's sister, not as the reliable family problem solver, but as Lauren Winter's accomplished, valued, and worthy of celebration in my own right. But reality waited for me at home, blinking insistently on my phone screen. 3 missed calls from my mother, 5 text messages from Emma, each more demanding than the last. The final one read, "Where are you? Need to coordinate outfits. Wear something subtle. My boss is coming and I'm wearing red." I set the phone down on my dresser and stared at my reflection in the mirror. The woman who looked back at me seemed different somehow. Her eyes clearer, her shoulders straighter. The blue dress I'd worn to my private celebration still hung perfectly, the color bringing out flecks of sapphire in my eyes that I'd never noticed before. I had always described my eyes as just blue, while Emma's were striking azure. My mother's phrasing, not mine. "Something subtle," I murmured to my reflection, touching the fabric of my dress. Translation: don't outshine Emma. Don't draw attention. Fade into the background where you belong. I opened my closet and pulled out the beige dress I had originally purchased for this evening before I knew my celebration would be commandeered. It was elegant but muted, appropriate for a secondary character, not the protagonist. Exactly what was expected of me. My hands hesitated on the zipper of my blue dress. For 27 years, I had played the role assigned to me: the dutiful daughter, the supportive sister, the perpetual backdrop. But today, something had shifted. The woman who had stood among friends and colleagues at Riverview Bistro, accepting their genuine recognition, could not so easily slip back into invisibility. I left the blue dress on and slipped my grandmother's bracelet back around my wrist. One small act of defiance, a reminder to myself of who I truly was, even as I walked into the lion's den of family expectations. Le Méridien glittered with sophistication as I approached. Crystal chandeliers spilled light onto marble floors. Well-dressed attendants greeted guests at the entrance. Through the restaurant's expansive windows, I could see my carefully planned celebration had been transformed. The elegant white floral arrangements I had selected had been supplemented with bold red roses, Emma's favorite. The simple, tasteful banner announcing my MBA achievement had been joined by a larger, more elaborate one celebrating Emma's promotion. I took a steadying breath before entering, schooling my features into the pleasant, accommodating expression I had perfected over years of family gatherings. The maitre d' recognized me immediately. "Miss Winters, welcome. Your family is already seated in the private dining room." As I followed him through the restaurant, I noticed additional tables had been added to accommodate Emma's colleagues. What had been designed as an intimate dinner for 30 had expanded to a gathering of nearly 50, with the new guests clustered around my sister like planets orbiting a sun. Emma spotted me first, waving exuberantly from her position at the center of the main table. Her red dress was a perfect match for the roses, which I now realized had been specifically chosen to complement her outfit. She had always been strategic that way. "Lauren, finally, everyone's been waiting for you." Her voice carried across the room, drawing attention to my arrival, and subtly to my tardiness. "I was just telling everyone about my new position. Come sit." My mother rose to greet me, her eyes immediately cataloging my appearance. Her gaze lingered on my blue dress, a flicker of disapproval crossing her features. "I thought you were wearing the beige," she said quietly, as she embraced me, her whisper masked by the gesture of affection. "Blue is really more Emma's color." "Congratulations on your graduation, honey," my father added, giving me a brief distracted hug before turning back to the man seated beside him, clearly one of Emma's superiors based on his expensive suit and my father's attentive posture. I took the only empty seat noticeably distant from the center of the table where my parents and Emma held court. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. Even at my own graduation dinner, even at an event I had planned and paid for, I had been physically positioned at the periphery. A server appeared pouring champagne. Emma immediately stood glass raised. "I'd like to make a toast," she announced, her voice commanding immediate attention. "First to my amazing sister Lauren, who finally finished her MBA." She flashed me a quick smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And of course to new beginnings at Meridian Marketing, where I've just been promoted to Assistant Director of Client Relations." Applause erupted, considerably more enthusiastic for the second achievement than the first. I sipped my champagne silently, watching as Emma basked in the attention. She had always known how to work a room, how to make herself the gravitational center of any gathering. It was a skill our parents had nurtured in her from childhood, enrolling her in theater and public speaking while my academic achievements were acknowledged with distracted nods. Dinner progressed predictably. The conversation flowed around me like water around a stone, occasionally lapping at my edges, but never fully including me. Emma's work colleagues dominated the discussion, with my parents eagerly participating, asking detailed questions about the marketing agency, complimenting the company's recent campaigns. My father was particularly attentive to Emma's boss, laughing too loudly at his jokes, refilling his wineglass with practiced deference. When the main course was cleared, my mother nudged me. "Lauren, perhaps you should say a few words about your graduation." "Keep it brief, though. Emma's boss wants to make an announcement about her new responsibilities." I stood acutely aware of the disinterested expressions on most guests' faces. These were Emma's colleagues, after all. They had no connection to me or my achievements. I had become an afterthought at my own celebration. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I began. "Completing my MBA at Wharton has been a journey of—" "Oh, before Lauren continues," my mother interrupted, standing quickly. "I just want to make sure everyone knows that Emma's promotion comes with a team of 5 reporting directly to her, and responsibility for the agency's 3 largest clients." The interruption hung in the air for a moment, breathtaking in its blatant disregard. Several guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, suddenly finding their dessert plates fascinating. Emma beamed, either oblivious to or unconcerned by the social impropriety. I remained standing, my prepared words evaporating in the heat of humiliation that flooded my cheeks. 27 years of similar moments crystallized in that single interruption. Every school award overshadowed by Emma's latest performance. Every academic honor diminished by comparison to my sister's more visible achievements. As I was saying, I continued, my voice steadier than I felt. Completing my MBA has been challenging but rewarding. I'm grateful to those who supported me through the process. I raised my glass slightly. To new beginnings for us all. I sat down quickly, my brief toast immediately forgotten, as Emma's boss stood to elaborate on her new role. Under the table, my fingers found my grandmother's bracelet, tracing its links like a rosary. Across the table, Jessica from my study group, one of the few friends I had invited who had attended both celebrations, caught my eye. Her expression held a mix of sympathy and outrage on my behalf. She leaned toward her husband, whispering something that made him glance at me with similar concern. The dessert course arrived, an elaborate presentation of petit four and chocolate sculptures. I recognized none of it. The simple tiramisu I had selected had been replaced with Emma's preferences, another detail altered without consultation. As coffee was served, I excused myself and stepped outside onto the restaurant's terrace for a moment of respite. The Philadelphia skyline glittered against the night sky, a mosaic of light and possibility. I inhaled deeply, letting the cool evening air soothe my frayed nerves. The door opened behind me. Jessica joined me at the railing, her expression troubled. "Are you okay?" she asked simply. I attempted a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "I'm fine. This is exactly what I expected." Jessica shook her head. "It's not right, Lauren. This was supposed to be your celebration. You worked so hard for this degree." "It's just how my family operates," I replied. "Emma is the star. I'm the supporting cast. That private dinner earlier, that was the real celebration, wasn't it?" She hesitated, then added, "Your sister doesn't know about that, does she?" Before I could respond, the terrace door swung open again. Emma emerged, her red dress vivid against the night sky. She approached with a champagne flute in hand, her movements precise and controlled despite the alcohol I knew she had consumed. "There you are," she said, her tone suggesting I had deliberately gone missing rather than stepped out for air. Mom's looking for you. Something about settling the bill before people start leaving. Jessica's eyebrows rose. The bill, but this is your sister's graduation dinner that she planned. Emma's gaze flickered to Jessica as if noticing her for the first time. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Lauren always handles the practical details. She's so good with numbers and budgets. I'm more of the creative type. She turned back to me. Speaking of which, did I mention that Parker Williams was impressed by my pitch? He's the client I was telling everyone about earlier when you were in the restroom or whatever. I wasn't in the restroom, I said quietly. I was making my graduation toast. Emma waved her hand dismissively. Right, of course. Anyway, he specifically requested me for their new campaign. Isn't that amazing first week of my promotion? And I'm already being asked for by name. Jessica looked between us, her discomfort evident. I should get back to Michael. Lauren, I'll see you inside in a minute. As Jessica departed, Emma's demeanor shifted. She moved closer, lowering her voice. Why are you wearing that dress? Mom said you were wearing beige. I decided blue suited me better tonight, I replied. It's just, Emma frowned. My boss's wife is wearing nearly the same color, and I told her she'd be the only one in blue. It makes things awkward. Always, I was expected to accommodate, to adjust, to diminish myself for the comfort and convenience of others, particularly Emma. I'm sorry if it's awkward, I said, not sorry at all, but this is my graduation dinner. At least it was supposed to be. Emma's expression hardened. Are you still upset about that? Come on, Lauren. It made sense to combine them. Why have two separate events when we could just have one big celebration? Plus, this way you get to meet all these important people from Meridian Marketing. Networking opportunities, right? Isn't that what business school is all about? Her ability to reframe her appropriation of my event as a favor to me was breathtaking in its audacity. Before I could respond, Jessica's husband Michael appeared at the door, his expression unusually serious. Lauren, he called, could you come inside for a moment? There's some confusion about the reservation details. I followed him back into the restaurant, Emma trailing behind us. At the main table, my mother was engaged in what appeared to be a tense conversation with the maitre d'. Her smile strained and artificial. There seems to be some misunderstanding, she said as I approached. The maitre d' is saying that the final payment is due now, but your father thought you had already arranged to cover it. Of course they did. I had made the reservations, secured the venue, planned the menu. Why wouldn't I also be expected to pay for the significantly expanded guest list and upgraded menu items I had never approved? The maitre d' looked deeply uncomfortable. Miss Winters, as per our conversation yesterday, the final balance is $4,860, reflecting the additional guests and menu modifications. Nearly $5,000. For a celebration that had been taken from me. For extra guests I hadn't invited. For an event where I had been interrupted, sidelined, and diminished. I felt something inside me shift, a tectonic plate of self-preservation, finally breaking free after decades of pressure. I'll cover my original reservation, I said, my voice calm but firm. The additional costs for Emma's guests and the menu changes will need to be paid by whoever authorized those modifications. My mother's smile froze. My father, sensing tension, excused himself from his conversation and joined us. Is there a problem? He asked, his voice lowered but edged with annoyance. Lauren is refusing to pay for the extra guests, my mother whispered, her eyes darting around to ensure none of Emma's colleagues were witnessing this break in the family's carefully maintained facade of harmony. My father's expression darkened. Lauren, don't make a scene. We'll discuss this later. The familiar pattern asserted itself. My concerns dismissed my boundaries, ignored my legitimate grievances classified as troublemaking. But this time I did not yield. There's nothing to discuss, I replied evenly. I budgeted for my original plan. I'm not covering the unauthorized additions. Emma stepped forward, her eyes widening in disbelief. Are you serious right now? You're going to make an issue about money at my celebration. Your celebration, Michael repeated, looking confused. I thought this was Lauren's graduation dinner. Uncomfortable silence fell over our small group. The maitre d' cleared his throat delicately. Perhaps I should give you a moment to discuss this privately, he suggested, stepping away. Emma stared at me, a flush of anger rising to her cheeks. I can't believe you're embarrassing me like this in front of my colleagues. This is my big moment. Your big moment, I echoed. At my graduation dinner. That I planned. And now I'm expected to pay for despite never approving the changes that nearly doubled the cost. My father reached for his wallet with a dramatic sigh of martyrdom. I'll handle it. But Lauren, we'll be discussing your behavior later. My behavior. Always I was the problem, never the situation itself. Never the constant erasure of my needs, my achievements, my very existence within the family narrative. Jessica and Michael exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable at witnessing this family dynamic laid so bare. Jessica touched my arm gently. Lauren, Michael, and I need to head out. Early meeting tomorrow. Her eyes conveyed what her words could not, an escape route offered with compassion. Actually, I think I'll leave with you, I said, making a swift decision. I've had a long day. My mother's expression transformed from irritation to alarm. You can't leave now. The dinner isn't over. What will Emma's colleagues think? I'm sure they'll barely notice, I replied, gathering my purse. After all, this is Emma's celebration, not mine. The walk home from Le Méridien stretched longer than usual, the night air doing little to cool the burning mix of emotions coursing through me. Jessica and Michael had offered to drive me, but I'd needed the solitude. The physical movement, the time to process what had just happened, and what it represented about my place within my family. My phone had vibrated continuously for the first 10 minutes after I left the restaurant. I finally silenced it, unwilling to subject myself to the barrage of guilt and recrimination that undoubtedly filled my family's messages. They would be angry, defensive, bewildered by my unreasonable behavior. Never once would they consider that perhaps, just perhaps, I had legitimate cause for my actions. The lights of my apartment building glowed ahead, a beacon of sanctuary. Inside those walls, I answered to no one but myself. I had created a space that reflected my tastes, my preferences, my identity, separate from the role I played in my family's drama. It was the one place where I was never expected to shrink, to accommodate, to disappear for someone else's comfort. As I climbed the stairs to my third-floor apartment, exhaustion settled over me like a heavy blanket. The emotional toll of the day, the private celebration that had filled me with joy, followed by the public humiliation that had become all too familiar, left me drained. I unlocked my door, stepping into the quiet calm of my personal domain. The answering machine on my landline blinked insistently. I rarely used the old-fashioned device, having kept it primarily because my grandmother had always called me on that number. After her passing, I couldn't bring myself to disconnect it. Now, it served as a secondary contact method, one that my family knew existed but seldom used, preferring the immediate gratification of cell phones. I pressed the play button, expecting perhaps a telemarketer or wrong number. Instead, my grandmother's voice filled the room. Lauren, darling, it's Grandma Rose. I froze, my heart seizing in my chest. The timestamp indicated the message was from 5 years ago, saved on the machine all this time. I had never noticed it, had never thought to check saved messages after her passing. Her voice continued, slightly crackly, but unmistakably hers. I've been thinking about our conversation last week. You're putting so much pressure on yourself to make your parents see your worth. But, sweetheart, you need to understand something I learned too late in my own life. You cannot force someone to see value in what they've already decided to overlook. Your mother, my daughter, has always been blind to certain kinds of light. It's her limitation, not yours. A pause then. The silver bracelet I gave you belonged to my mother. She gave it to me when I was facing my own crossroads. Wear it when you need to remember that your worth isn't determined by those who cannot see it clearly. I love you, my brilliant girl. Call me when you can. Tears streamed down my face as the message ended. My grandmother's posthumous wisdom felt like a benediction, a release from the prison of seeking validation, where it would never be given. I touched the silver bracelet on my wrist, feeling its links with new reverence. A sharp knock at my door startled me from my reverie. I wiped my eyes quickly, composing myself before checking the peephole. Emma stood in the hallway, still in her red dress, her expression a complex mixture of anger and something less definable, vulnerability perhaps. I hesitated, then opened the door. "What are you doing here?" I asked, not bothering to disguise my surprise. She pushed past me into the apartment. "What am I doing here? What were you doing walking out of my celebration like that?" "Your celebration," I repeated, closing the door. "That's exactly the problem, Emma. It was supposed to be my graduation dinner." "Oh my God, are you still on that?" She paced my living room, her heels clicking aggressively on the hardwood floor. "It was more efficient to combine them," Mom explained that, "and it made sense for me to invite my colleagues since this promotion is a big deal for my career." Did it also make sense to interrupt me during my toast, to replace the menu I had selected, to expect me to pay for all the additions I never approved? Emma stopped pacing, her expression shifting to one of genuine confusion. You always handle those kinds of details. That's your role. My role, I echoed, the words bitter on my tongue. Yes, your role. You're the organized one, the responsible one. I'm the creative one, the social one. That's how it's always been. The casual way she defined us, reducing complex human beings to simplistic functions within a family system, struck me with new clarity. We had been slotted into these roles from childhood, and the patterns had calcified around us until they seemed not like choices, but like immutable truths. Did it ever occur to you, I asked quietly, that maybe I didn't choose that role? That maybe I wanted recognition for my achievements, not just for my usefulness? Emma sank onto my couch, suddenly looking exhausted. Everyone recognizes your achievements, Lauren. You've always been the smart one, the one with the perfect grades and the impressive degrees. Recognition isn't the occasional acknowledgement of a fact, Emma. It's celebration. It's centering someone's experience rather than perpetually pushing it to the periphery. When was the last time Mom and Dad attended one of my academic ceremonies? When was the last time they talked about my accomplishments the way they constantly discuss yours? She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. For perhaps the first time in our adult lives, Emma seemed to be genuinely considering my perspective rather than immediately defending her own. They came to your undergraduate graduation, she offered finally, but the example felt weak even to her, judging by her expression. They came late and left early because you had a dance recital that evening, I corrected. They missed my valedictory speech entirely. Silence stretched between us. Outside, a distant siren wailed, then faded. I didn't know that, Emma said, eventually, her voice smaller than I was accustomed to hearing it. I remember them rushing me to get ready for the recital, but I didn't realize. There's a lot you don't realize, I said, not unkindly. You've been at the center for so long you can't see what it's like at the margins. I moved to the kitchen, filling the electric kettle. The familiar ritual of making tea gave my hands something to do, while my mind processed the unprecedented situation of Emma actually listening to me. Do you want some tea? I offered a small olive branch. She nodded, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. I selected 2 mugs, dropping chamomile tea bags into each. Did you really have a separate dinner earlier today? She asked suddenly. Your friend Jessica mentioned something about it on the terrace. I hesitated, then nodded. Yes, a small gathering at Riverview Bistro with people from my MBA program and a couple of professors. Why didn't you tell us? The question was so breathtakingly lacking in self-awareness that I nearly laughed. Why would I? So it could be combined with something else. So it could become about someone else. I needed one memory that was just mine. The kettle whistled. I poured steaming water over the tea bags, the fragrant steam rising between us like a veil. I handed Emma a mug, which she accepted with uncharacteristic meekness. You're really angry about this, she said, as if finally processing the depth of my feelings. About the dinner, about everything. I'm not angry, Emma. I'm finished. There's a difference. She looked up sharply. Finished? What does that mean? I sat in the armchair across from her, cradling my tea. It means I'm done trying to matter in spaces where I've been consistently shown that I don't. It means I'm done overextending myself for people who take without giving back. It means I'm establishing boundaries. Boundaries, she repeated, as if the word were foreign. Perhaps for Emma it was. She had never needed boundaries in our family. She had always been the one for whom space was created, not the one fighting for a sliver of recognition. Yes, boundaries. Like no longer funding family events that get commandeered. No longer accepting being interrupted or sidelined. No longer pretending it doesn't hurt when my achievements are treated as footnotes while yours are celebrated as headlines. Emma stared into her tea, uncharacteristically silent. When she finally spoke, her voice held a tremor I had rarely heard from my perpetually confident sister. Do you hate me, Lauren? The question caught me off guard. No, I answered truthfully. I don't hate you, Emma. This isn't about hating you. It's about finally loving myself enough to stop accepting scraps of acknowledgement and calling it a feast. She nodded slowly, still not meeting my eyes. I never asked for them to treat us differently. I know, I conceded. But you never questioned it either. You accepted the spotlight as your birthright while watching me struggle in the shadows. Emma finally looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I've always been jealous of you, you know. Now it was my turn to be caught off guard. Jealous of what? Your certainty, your intelligence, the fact that you know exactly who you are and what you want. She set her mug down, her hands trembling slightly. Do you know why I invited all those people from work tonight? Because I'm terrified I'm going to fail in this new position. I thought if I could make it look like I was already successful, maybe it would become true. The confession hung in the air between us, surprising in its vulnerability. Emma had always projected unassailable confidence, had always seemed to navigate life with the ease of someone for whom doors naturally opened. The idea that she harbored insecurities, that she envied anything about me, seemed almost impossible to reconcile with the sister I thought I knew. You've never failed at anything in your life, I said, unable to keep the hint of bitterness from my voice. Because I've never truly risked anything, she replied with unexpected self-awareness. I only pursue what I know I can excel at, what will bring the right kind of attention. You take real risks, Lauren. You challenge yourself, even when no one is watching or applauding. An uncomfortable silence settled between us as I absorbed this new perspective. All these years, I had seen only Emma's advantages, the parental support, the natural charisma, the effortless social success. I had never considered that she might view my academic focus and self-sufficiency as strengths rather than consolation prizes. There's something else you should know, Emma said, her voice dropping to nearly a whisper. The promotion isn't exactly what I've been making it out to be. I raised an eyebrow, waiting for her to continue. I'm on probation, actually, she admitted. The promotion is conditional on my performance over the next 3 months. If I don't meet their metrics, I'll be back to my old position or possibly let go entirely. The revelation landed like a stone in still water, ripples of implication expanding outward. The elaborate celebration, the insistence on inviting colleagues and superiors, the desperate need for the evening to impress, all of it, recontextualized by this admission. Does Mom know, Dad? I asked. Emma shook her head. No one knows except my direct supervisor. Can you imagine telling Mom, after all her talk about how I'm following in her footsteps, achieving what she couldn't because of her injury? She laughed, but the sound was hollow. The great Emma Winters possibly facing demotion before her promotion is even official. They'd never look at me the same way again. For the first time, I glimpsed the weight of expectation Emma carried, different from mine, but perhaps equally burdensome. Where I struggled for recognition, she struggled with the pressure of maintaining an image of effortless success. Where I fought to be seen at all, she fought to be seen only in her most perfect form. Why are you telling me this? I asked. You could have kept pretending. I wouldn't have known the difference. Emma met my gaze directly. Because you were right to walk out tonight. Because for once in my life, I want to be honest with someone instead of performing for them. And because... She hesitated. I need your help. My help? The reason I'm on probation is that I've been struggling with the analytical aspects of the campaigns. The data interpretation, the ROI calculations, the metrics reporting. She took a deep breath. The stuff that you excel at. I sat back processing this request. All our lives, the dynamic had been clear. Emma shone while I supported from the shadows. Now she was explicitly asking for my expertise, acknowledging a weakness where I possessed strength. It represented a seismic shift in our relationship, or at least the potential for one. I don't know, Emma. I'm trying to establish boundaries, not sign up for more ways to be utilized without recognition. She nodded quickly. I understand. And I'll pay you for your time, of course. Consulting rates. This isn't me asking for a favor. It's me recognizing that you have skills I need, and that those skills have value. The distinction was significant and unprecedented in our relationship. Before I could respond, a sharp knock at the door interrupted us. Through the peephole, I could see my parents standing in the hallway, their expressions tense. I turned back to Emma. Did you tell them you were coming here? She shook her head. No, but they probably guessed. Or tracked my phone. You know how Mom gets when she thinks there's a situation to manage? I hesitated, my hand on the doorknob. Opening the door meant inviting the full force of family dysfunction into my sanctuary. But refusing to open it would only delay the inevitable confrontation. I took a deep breath, centered myself, and opened the door to face whatever came next. My father entered first, his normally commanding presence somewhat diminished by the events of the evening. My mother followed, her eyes immediately scanning the apartment as if searching for evidence of some transgression. Lauren, she began, her voice tight with controlled emotion. Your behavior tonight was completely unacceptable, leaving in the middle of the celebration embarrassing us in front of Emma's colleagues. My behavior. I interrupted, the words escaping before I could temper them. What about yours? Combining my graduation dinner with Emma's work event without asking me, interrupting my toast, expecting me to pay for changes I never approved. My father stepped forward, his expression darkening. That's enough, Lauren. Your mother was simply trying to create an efficient solution that benefited everyone. This attitude of yours is completely uncalled for. Efficient. I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. That's exactly how Mom described it earlier, as if my graduation celebration was just another logistics problem to be solved in the most convenient way possible. That's not what I meant, my mother protested, though her tone lacked conviction. It's exactly what you meant, I replied. My achievements have always been secondary considerations in this family. Convenient when they reflect well on you, inconvenient when they require actual attention or support. That's absurd, my father scoffed. We've always supported your education. When was the last time either of you attended one of my academic ceremonies? When did you ever put one of my events ahead of Emma's? When did you ever talk about my accomplishments with the same pride and enthusiasm you reserve for hers? My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly unaccustomed to such direct confrontation from their typically accommodating elder daughter. We've always been proud of you, Lauren, my mother said, her voice softening into the placating tone she used when trying to smooth over conflicts. You've just never needed the same kind of encouragement as Emma. You've always been so self-sufficient, so capable on your own. Self-sufficient by necessity, I corrected, because I learned early that my needs came last in the family hierarchy. My father's expression hardened. That's unfair, Lauren. We've given you everything you needed. Financially, perhaps, I acknowledged. But there are other forms of support: recognition, celebration, prioritization. In those areas, the disparity between how you've treated Emma and how you've treated me has been stark. So that's what this tantrum is about? My father asked dismissively. You're jealous of your sister. I felt a familiar wave of frustration wash over me. The way my legitimate grievances were minimized, reframed as pettiness or immaturity, rather than recognized as the product of years of differential treatment. But before I could respond, Emma spoke up from the couch. It's not a tantrum, Dad, and Lauren has every right to be upset. 3 heads turned toward her in surprise. Emma had never, not once in our entire lives, openly sided against our parents in a family conflict. She had occasionally offered private sympathy to me after particularly egregious incidents, but in the moment, she had always aligned with the parental perspective. Emma, our mother began, clearly thrown off balance by this unexpected alliance. You don't understand the full situation. I think I do, Emma countered, standing to join me. Lauren planned her graduation dinner. She invited her friends and professors. She paid for it. And we took it over without even consulting her, then expected her to foot the bill for our changes. If someone did that to me, I'd be furious. My father waved his hand dismissively. This is ridiculous. We were trying to create a nice family event that celebrated both our daughters. And now you're both acting like we committed some terrible offense. Intent doesn't negate impact, I said quietly. Maybe you meant well, but the effect was to once again push me to the margins of my own life event. My mother sighed heavily, moving to sit in one of my kitchen chairs. I don't understand when everything became so complicated. We've always been a close family. We've always supported each other. I opened the drawer of my desk, removing the leather-bound notebook that had become my silent testimony to years of one-sided support. I placed it on the coffee table, its presence like a stone altar between us. Do you know what this is? I asked, my voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through me. This is a record of every dollar I've contributed to this family over the past decade. College tuition for Emma when Dad's business was struggling, medical bills for Mom's ankle surgeries, property taxes when you fell behind, the loan for Dad to restart his consulting practice after the partnership dissolved. My mother's face paled. My father stepped forward, reaching for the notebook, but I moved it out of his reach. What are you saying? He demanded, his voice rising with defensive anger. That you've been keeping score, holding grudges about financial help within the family. Not keeping score, ma'am, I corrected. Keeping receipts, because no matter how many times I've stepped up to support this family financially, my contributions are consistently forgotten or minimized. while anything you do for me is framed as extraordinary generosity, for which I should be eternally grateful. I opened the notebook to its final page where a total was circled at the bottom. $123,000. That's what I've contributed to this family while putting myself through business school, working 3 jobs at times, taking out student loans that I'll be repaying for years. Emma moved closer, peering at the notebook with evident shock. I had no idea, she murmured. I knew you helped sometimes, but this? My father's face flushed dark red. He opened his mouth, likely to unleash one of his practiced tirades, but then his gaze fell on the open notebook. The numbers inside stood as unassailable evidence, blocking every potential accusation. He closed his mouth again, breathing heavily. My mother said nothing, her lips trembling but silent. The air of casual indifference she typically maintained had evaporated, replaced by a stunned bewilderment. Emma frowned visibly, struggling to process this new information. You think you're so noble just because you paid some bills, you think you have the right to look down on this family. But even as the words left her mouth, she seemed to realize how hollow they were. The truth was written across every page of the notebook. It wasn't a few bills. It was a decade of financial support that had never been properly acknowledged. Emma fell silent, her expression shifting from defensiveness to embarrassment, and finally to a stunned emptiness she couldn't disguise. I rose slowly and walked to the apartment door. My hand rested on the knob as I turned back to face them. When I spoke, my voice was calm but edged with resolve. This apartment is my safe space, the one place where I refuse to allow disrespect or control. If you cannot respect me, I must ask you to leave. All 3 of them stared at me in shock, as though they had just heard a foreign language. For years, I had been the quiet daughter, the one who endured, bowed my head, and carried the weight. And now I was the one telling my own parents and sister to step out of my door. That moment shattered the script our family had lived by for so long. My father tightened his grip on his briefcase and exhaled a long, heavy breath. My mother opened her mouth to speak, but then closed it again, her head lowered in silence. Emma stood frozen for a moment, then gathered her purse with deliberate movements. You'll regret this, Lauren, she said, but her eyes flickered away, no longer carrying the certainty they once did. I opened the door without a word. Their footsteps echoed down the hallway, heavy and awkward, until their figures disappeared, leaving behind a quiet emptiness. I closed the door gently, leaned my back against it, and felt the pounding of my heart. For the first time in my life, I had drawn a clear boundary, and they had been forced to respect it. In this small apartment, I suddenly felt a strange lightness in my chest, though it was laced with a faint tremor of uncertainty. But I knew that from this moment forward, a new Lauren Winters had begun. A Lauren who knew how to stand up, how to protect her own space, and who would no longer allow anyone else to define her worth. Standing in Shadows, Part 3. Morning light filtered through the curtains of my apartment, casting gentle patterns across the hardwood floor. I lay in bed watching dust motes dance in the golden beams, feeling strangely weightless. For the first time in my adult life, I had slept without the familiar knot of anxiety in my chest, that constant companion born from years of trying to matter in a family where I was perpetually peripheral. The events of the previous evening replayed in my mind my family's stunned expressions as they stared at the notebook documenting years of financial support I had provided, the rare silence that had fallen over my normally verbose father, my mother's trembling lips as the reality of their treatment became undeniable. And finally, the moment I had stood at my apartment door, hand on the knob, and calmly asked them to leave. This apartment is my safe space, the one place where I refuse to allow disrespect or control. If you cannot respect me, I must ask you to leave. The words had emerged with a clarity and strength I hadn't known I possessed. And in the stunned silence that followed, as my father tightened his grip on his briefcase, as my mother lowered her head, unable to meet my eyes, as Emma's confident facade cracked, revealing uncertainty beneath, I had known with absolute certainty that a fundamental shift had occurred. Not just in how they saw me, but in how I saw myself. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, a habit born of obligation rather than desire. No missed calls, no text messages. The silence from my family was unprecedented. In the past, any conflict had been followed by an immediate barrage of communication. My mother's passive-aggressive texts, my father's demanding voicemails, Emma's dramatic accusations. Their collective goal had always been the same: to pull me back into orbit around them as quickly as possible, to restore the family dynamic where I occupied my assigned role of supporter enabler and invisible backbone. But today, there was only silence. I set the phone down, unsure whether to feel relieved or unsettled by this departure from pattern. I rose and moved to the window, gazing out at Philadelphia awakening below. The city seemed different somehow, sharper, more vibrant, more full of possibility. Or perhaps it was my perception that had changed. The woman who had asked her family to leave her apartment last night was not the same woman who had spent years shrinking herself to fit into the narrow space they had allocated for her. My grandmother's bracelet caught the sunlight as I raised my hand to push back the curtain further. Its silver links had become more than jewelry. They were a tangible reminder of her final words to me before she passed. "Remember your worth, Lauren," she had whispered. "It comes from within, not from anyone else's recognition." I touched the bracelet gently, remembering the woman who had seen me when no one else did. My grandmother Rose had been a force of nature, brilliant, determined, uncompromising in her expectations, but equally unrestrained in her love. She alone in my family had celebrated my academic achievements, had encouraged my analytical mind, had treated me not as Emma's less interesting sister, but as a unique individual with my own path to forge. Her loss 5 years ago had left a void that made my family's emotional neglect even more pronounced. Without her steady presence, her fierce advocacy, I had slipped further into the shadows, becoming ever more the family utility and ever less the valued daughter and sister. A week passed in this strange new silence. I attended meetings at work, collaborated with colleagues, bought groceries, and went for evening runs along the river. Ordinary days filled with ordinary activities, yet transformed by the absence of family drama, constantly humming in the background of my consciousness. I found myself more present, more engaged, more able to appreciate simple pleasures. The perfect foam on my morning latte, the satisfaction of solving a complex problem at work, the vibrant colors of spring flowers pushing up through city planters. On Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed with an email notification. My breath caught when I saw the sender, Professor Jenkins. The subject line read simply, "Opportunity." I opened it immediately. "Lauren, I recommended you for the Richardson Project Leadership position. The selection committee was impressed with your portfolio and would like to meet next week. This is the opportunity we discussed, the one that could take your career international. Details attached. Proud of you. Jenkins." My hands trembled slightly as I downloaded the attachment. The Richardson Project was a prestigious international business development initiative I had followed since its inception 3 years ago. Founded by British entrepreneur Helena Richardson, it focused on creating sustainable business models in emerging markets with an emphasis on women-led enterprises. Leadership positions were coveted and rarely offered to recent MBA graduates. Professor Jenkins had mentioned the project to me several times during my final semester, noting how perfectly my research on microfinance structures aligned with their mission. He had hinted that he had connections with the organization, but had never elaborated. The fact that he had recommended me, had seen enough potential in me to put his own reputation behind my candidacy, sent a wave of gratitude through me. The details confirmed what I had hoped: the position would be based primarily in London, with frequent travel to emerging markets across Europe and Asia. It would require relocation within 2 months. The compensation package was generous, the professional development opportunities unparalleled, and the 2-year commitment would position me perfectly for executive roles afterward. It was in every conceivable way my dream opportunity, and it had arrived at precisely the moment when I was finally free enough emotionally and psychologically to seize it without hesitation. 3 years ago, a similar international opportunity had presented itself, a position with the World Bank's development team in Geneva. I had been thrilled, had even begun researching apartments and language classes. But then my father's business had faced a crisis. My mother had called in tears, explaining how they might lose the house, how Emma's dance academy tuition was at risk. Without explicitly asking, they had made it clear that they needed me, needed my financial support, my practical problem solving, my willingness to sacrifice my own ambitions for the family's stability. I had declined the Geneva position, had stayed in Philadelphia, had transferred a significant portion of my savings to my parents' account, had watched as Emma continued her dance education without interruption, as my parents maintained their lifestyle with only minor adjustments, as my own dreams receded into the background. This time would be different. This time I would prioritize my own path. I typed a quick reply to Professor Jenkins, thanking him for the recommendation, and confirming my interest in meeting the selection committee. As I pressed send, a strange sense of destiny washed over me. Had I still been entangled in my family's web, still desperately seeking their approval and recognition, would I have been able to consider an international move? Or would I have once again compromised my ambitions to remain available for their needs in crises? My phone rang, startling me from my reverie. Emma's name flashed on the screen. After a week of silence, this sudden contact sent my pulse racing. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen before finally answering. "Hello, Lauren?" Emma's voice sounded different, subdued, lacking its usual performative confidence. "Can we talk in person, I mean? I'm at Riverside Coffee." Riverside Coffee was just 2 blocks from my apartment, close enough that this wasn't a casual suggestion. She was already waiting for me to join her. "Why?" I asked. I asked not unkindly but cautiously. "Because I've been thinking about everything you said last week, and because I need to tell you something important, please." The please caught me off guard. Emma rarely, if ever, made straightforward requests. Her communication style typically oscillated between demands disguised as suggestions and manipulative appeals to my sense of duty. This direct, simple ask felt unprecedented. "I'll be there in 15 minutes, I replied after a brief hesitation. Riverside Coffee occupied a corner space with expansive windows overlooking the Delaware River. The afternoon sun transformed the water into a rippling sheet of gold, a perfect backdrop for the trendy cafe with its exposed brick walls and industrial lighting fixtures. I spotted Emma immediately seated at a table near the window, her fingers tracing patterns on a ceramic mug. She was dressed casually in jeans and a simple blouse, another departure from her typical, carefully curated image. She looked up as I approached, her expression a complex mixture of nervousness and determination. 2 empty cups sat in front of her, suggesting she had been waiting for some time, perhaps gathering courage. "You came," she said, a note of relief in her voice. "You said please," I replied, sliding into the chair across from her. "That's rare enough to get my attention." A faint smile flickered across her face. "Fair enough." She pushed a 3rd cup toward me. "I ordered your usual, oat milk latte, extra shot, light foam." I was surprised she remembered my coffee preference with such precision. It seemed symbolic of our relationship. Emma noticed details when she needed to, but only deployed that attentiveness strategically. Or perhaps that assessment was unfair, a product of years of justified resentment. "Thank you," I said, taking a sip. "So, what's this important thing you need to tell me?" Emma inhaled deeply, as if physically bracing herself. "I quit my job." The statement hung in the air between us, simple but laden with implications. Emma, without a high-profile career, was Emma, without her primary identity, at least the identity she had cultivated so carefully for our parents and her social circle. "When?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Monday morning. After what happened at your apartment, I couldn't keep pretending." She looked down at her hands. The promotion was already slipping away. My boss could sense I wasn't confident about handling the analytics portion. But more than that, I realized I was chasing a career I don't even want, just to maintain this image of success that mom and dad expect. "What do you want?" I asked, genuinely curious. In all our years growing up together, I couldn't recall a single conversation where Emma had expressed authentic passion for marketing or client relations. She laughed softly, the sound tinged with both sadness and liberation. "That's the thing, I don't know. I've spent so many years being what everyone expected that I've never really figured out who I actually am or what I actually want." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "But I know I'm tired of living for their approval. I watched you stand up to them last week, and it was like seeing someone break out of a cage I didn't even realize we were both in." I sipped my latte, absorbing her words. The Emma sitting across from me seemed almost like a stranger, vulnerable, self-aware, searching. So different from the polished, confident sister, who had always seemed to navigate life with effortless ease. "What did they say when you told them about quitting?" I asked. Emma's expression darkened. Mom cried, Dad lectured, the usual performance. But something was different this time. I could suddenly see it all so clearly. The way that they've always positioned us against each other. The way they've trapped us both in these roles they created. Roles, I repeated the word, resonating with my own realizations. Yes, you as the reliable one who provides practical support but doesn't expect recognition. Me as the shining star who receives all the attention but has to maintain perfect appearances. Both of us serving their needs rather than developing our own identities. She shook her head slowly. I never saw it before. Or maybe I didn't want to see it. The insight surprised me not because it wasn't accurate, but because I hadn't expected Emma to perceive our family dynamic with such clarity. I had always assumed she was too comfortable in her role as the favorite to question the system that benefited her. So what now, I asked. What's your plan? I don't have one, honestly. She smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. For the first time in my life, I don't have every step mapped out to impress someone else. It's terrifying and strangely exhilarating. She hesitated, then added, I'm thinking of traveling for a while, using my savings to explore and figure out what actually matters to me. I nodded, understanding the appeal of distance and perspective. That sounds like a good idea. What about you? She asked. Any developments this past week? I hesitated, unsure how much to share. Old habits of self-protection made me reluctant to discuss the Richardson Project opportunity. In our family's long-established dynamic, any significant achievement of mine would inevitably be overshadowed or co-opted. But the woman sitting across from me wasn't the sister who had always absorbed all the light in the room. She was someone new, or perhaps someone who had always existed beneath the carefully maintained facade finally emerging into view. Actually, yes, I said, making a conscious choice to be open. I've been recommended for a leadership position with the Richardson Project. If I get it, I'll be moving to London in about 2 months. Emma's eyes widened. London, wow, Lauren, that's incredible. I waited for the familiar redirection, the subtle pivot that would turn the conversation back to her. But it didn't come. Instead, she leaned forward, genuine interest animating her features. Tell me about it. What exactly would you be doing? For the next 30 minutes, I found myself enthusiastically describing the Richardson Project, the leadership role, and the international scope of the work. I explained how the project aimed to create sustainable business structures in developing markets, with a particular focus on supporting women entrepreneurs, how the position would involve both strategic planning in London and hands-on implementation across various international sites, how the 2-year commitment could open doors to global opportunities I had only dreamed about. Emma listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated real engagement. Not once did she interrupt with a parallel anecdote about herself or attempt to diminish the significance of the opportunity. It was perhaps the longest conversation we had ever had that remained focused on my experiences and aspirations. As I finished explaining the timeline for the selection process, Emma reached across the table and squeezed my hand briefly. You're going to get it, she said with conviction. And you're going to be amazing at it. The simple vote of confidence, freely given without any ulterior motive, caught me off guard. A lump formed in my throat, and I swallowed hard against the unexpected emotion. Thank you, I said softly. Emma withdrew her hand, a shadow crossing her expression. I've never been very supportive, have I? All these years I've been so focused on being the center of attention that I never stopped to consider what you needed or wanted. We were both playing the roles assigned to us, I said, echoing her earlier insight. You didn't create the dynamic. No, but I benefited from it, and I never questioned it even when it was clearly hurting you. She sighed deeply. I'm sorry, Lauren. Truly sorry. The apology hung in the air between us, simple but profound. In our family, apologies were rare commodities, typically offered as strategic maneuvers rather than genuine expressions of remorse. This felt different, real. Thank you, I said again, accepting her words for what they were, a small bridge extending across years of complicated history. We finished our coffee in companionable silence, watching the late afternoon light play across the river. As we prepared to leave, Emma hesitated. Mom and Dad want to meet with you, she said finally. They've been talking about it all week, trying to figure out how to approach you after what happened. The familiar tension returned to my shoulders. What do they want? To explain themselves, I think. Maybe to apologize in their way. She shrugged slightly. I don't know if they're capable of really understanding or changing, but they're at least rattled enough to recognize something needs to be different. I considered this information carefully. Part of me wanted to refuse outright to maintain the peaceful distance I had established this past week. But another part recognized that true liberation might require one final conversation, one clear articulation of boundaries, rather than a silent severing. I'll think about it, I said finally. But on my terms, not theirs. Emma nodded, accepting this without argument. That's fair. As we parted outside the cafe, she surprised me with a genuine embrace. Not the performative hug she typically offered in public settings, but a real moment of connection. I'm proud of you, Lauren, she whispered, for standing up for yourself, for going after what you deserve. The words, so simple yet so profound, settled into the spaces inside me that had long ached for precisely this recognition. Not from professors or colleagues or friends, though their support mattered deeply, but from family, from someone who had known me from the beginning. Thank you, Emma, I said, my voice thick with emotion. And I'm proud of you too, for asking questions, for being willing to change. She smiled, a hint of the old mischievous Emma breaking through the newfound maturity. Who knows, maybe I'll end up in London too, once I figure out who I actually am. Maybe, I agreed, returning her smile. The city's big enough for both Winter sisters. As I walked back to my apartment, I felt something shift inside me, a recalibration of what family might mean moving forward. Not the suffocating system of assigned roles and conditional love I had grown up with, but something healthier. Something with room for growth, change, and genuine support. 3 days later, I stood in Professor Jenkins' office reviewing the final details before my interview with the Richardson Project Selection Committee. The morning sun streamed through his wide windows, illuminating the academic citations and framed photographs that lined his walls. In one corner hung a small photograph I had never noticed before, a much younger Jenkins standing beside my grandmother at an academic conference. Both were smiling broadly, clearly, celebrating some shared success. I moved closer, studying the unexpected connection. You knew my grandmother, Rose Winters. Jenkins looked up from the documents we'd been reviewing, following my gaze to the photograph. A warm smile spread across his face. Rose was my mentor when I was earning my doctorate. Brilliant economist, formidable intellect. One of the finest minds I ever encountered. He joined me by the photograph. She spoke about you often, you know. Her brilliant granddaughter with the analytical mind and compassionate heart. The revelation struck me with physical force. All these years, I had assumed Professor Jenkins' interest in my academic career was based solely on my performance in his classes. I had never suspected a connection that preceded our meeting, a thread of continuity, linking my grandmother's belief in me to his steadfast support. She never mentioned knowing you, I said softly. Rose was never one to name drop, Jenkins replied with a gentle laugh. But when you enrolled in my first-year economics course, she reached out. Asked me to keep an eye on you, though I suspect she knew you wouldn't need much watching. You had her same intensity, her same clarity of thought. I touched my grandmother's bracelet, feeling its links with renewed significance. Why didn't you ever tell me? Jenkins shrugged slightly. At first, I wanted to form my own impression of you, independent of my connection to Rose. Then, as you excelled, I thought it might undermine your confidence if you believed my support stemmed from a personal connection, rather than recognition of your abilities. He smiled kindly. You needed to know your success was entirely your own achievement. I nodded, understanding his reasoning, but still processing this unexpected revelation. My grandmother, even after her passing, had been looking out for me, extending her influence to ensure I had support in her absence. The Richardson Project. I began a new thought forming. Was that her suggestion too? Jenkins shook his head firmly. No. My recommendation was based entirely on your exceptional qualifications and potential. Rose would have agreed wholeheartedly, but this opportunity came to you on your own merits, Lauren. Never doubt that. Relief washed through me. While I cherished this newfound connection to my grandmother, it was equally important to know that this critical opportunity represented genuine recognition of my abilities, rather than the lingering influence of a personal relationship. I have something for you, Jenkins said, moving to his desk. He opened a drawer and removed a small leather-bound book. Rose left this with me years ago with instructions to give it to you when the time was right. After recommending you for Richardson, I knew that time had come. He placed the book in my hands. Its cover was worn smooth by frequent handling, the spine cracked in multiple places. Opening it carefully, I found pages filled with my grandmother's precise handwriting. Economic theories, personal observations, and philosophical musings, interspersed with pressed flowers and ticket stubs. A life of the mind documented with both academic rigor and human tenderness. A folded paper slipped from between the pages, my name written on it, in my grandmother's elegant script. With slightly trembling fingers, I unfolded it. Dearest Lauren, when you read this, you will have found your way to the path that is truly yours. I have watched you since childhood, seen your brilliance dimmed by circumstances, but never extinguished. Remember that your light belongs to you alone, not to be dominated or diminished by others' expectations. This journal contains my life's work, both professional and personal. I leave it to you not as a burden of legacy, but as a reminder that a woman's mind is her sovereign territory. Guard yours fiercely. With immeasurable love and absolute faith, Grandma Rose. Tears blurred my vision as I carefully refolded the letter. My grandmother had seen me, truly seen me when no one else had recognized both my potential and the constraints placed upon it by family dynamics, had left behind not just a silver bracelet, but a testament to her faith in me. Thank you for keeping this safe, I said to Jenkins, my voice steady despite the emotion coursing through me. He nodded, his expression warm with understanding. Rose would be immensely proud of you, Lauren. Not just of your academic achievements, but of the woman you've become. I slipped the journal into my bag, feeling its weight as both comfort and affirmation. As we returned to reviewing the interview materials, I felt newly centered, rooted in a legacy of intellectual courage that transcended my family's narrow definitions of success and value. That evening, as I prepared for the interview, I discovered something else unexpected. In organizing my files, I came across an old shoebox I hadn't opened in years. Inside were childhood mementos, report cards, certificates, small treasures from a time before I had learned to temper my expectations of recognition. Beneath a stack of academic awards lay an old cassette tape labeled simply voicemail. I remembered now. In the weeks after my grandmother's funeral, I had been too devastated to listen to her final message on my answering machine. Unable to delete it, but equally unable to hear her voice without breaking down, I had used an old recorder to capture the message, then stored it away until I felt strong enough to listen. 5 years had passed, and I had nearly forgotten its existence. Now, with trembling hands, I dug out an old cassette player from the back of my closet. I inserted the tape, pressed play, and held my breath. My grandmother's voice filled the room, slightly crackly but unmistakably hers. Lauren, darling, it's Grandma Rose. I've been thinking about our conversation last week. You're putting so much pressure on yourself to make your parents see your worth. But sweetheart, you need to understand something I learned too late in my own life. You cannot force someone to see value in what they've already decided to overlook. Your mother, my daughter, has always been blind to certain kinds of light. It's her limitation, not yours. A pause, then. The silver bracelet I gave you belonged to my mother. She gave it to me when I was facing my own crossroads. Wear it when you need to remember that your worth isn't determined by those who cannot see it clearly. I love you, my brilliant girl. Call me when you can. I sank onto my bed, letting the tears flow freely now. Her words, preserved across time, arrived at precisely the moment when I could fully receive their wisdom. You cannot force someone to see value in what they've already decided to overlook. The simple truth of it resonated through me, releasing the last tendrils of hope that if I just achieved enough, sacrificed enough, my parents might finally see me as I truly was. My grandmother had known, had tried to spare me years of futile effort, and now as I prepared to step into a future of my own making, her voice had returned to give me final permission to let go of that fruitless quest for validation. The interview with the Richardson Project Selection Committee unfolded with unexpected ease the following day. Where I might once have doubted my qualifications or diminished my achievements, I now spoke confidently about my skills, my vision, and my potential contributions. I drew on my research in microfinance structures, articulated clear strategies for implementing sustainable business models in emerging markets, and outlined how my approach would center the needs and insights of local women entrepreneurs. The panel responded with evident interest, engaging deeply with my ideas and asking thoughtful follow-up questions that has suggested genuine consideration rather than mere formality. The interview, scheduled for 30 minutes, extended to nearly an hour as our discussion evolved into a collaborative exploration of possibilities. As I left the conference room, the committee chair, Helena Richardson herself, shook my hand with surprising warmth. "Very impressive presentation, Ms. Winters. We'll be in touch within the week, but I think you should start brushing up on your British idioms." Her subtle wink suggested the formal decision was a mere formality. I floated through the remainder of the day, a quiet confidence humming beneath my skin. Whatever came next, whether London or Philadelphia, new challenges, or familiar terrain, I would face it as myself. Not as Emma's sister or my parents' overlooked daughter, but as Lauren Winters, competent, valuable, and worthy of taking up space in the world. That evening, as twilight settled over Philadelphia, transforming the cityscape into a tapestry of shadow and artificial light, my phone rang. The screen displayed my parents' number. I had been expecting this call since my coffee meeting with Emma had been preparing myself for whatever strategy they had devised to pull me back into the established family pattern. I answered with calm resolve. "Hello, Lauren," my father's voice uncharacteristically subdued. "Your mother and I would like to meet with you. To talk." "About what?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. A slight hesitation. "About what happened at your apartment. About everything." "I'm listening," I replied, neither accepting nor rejecting the invitation. "We thought perhaps dinner at our house tomorrow evening." The suggestion came wrapped in the familiar expectation that I would adjust my schedule to accommodate their convenience, that I would travel to their territory rather than having them meet me on mine. "That doesn't work for me," I said simply. "I have a prior commitment." This was true. I had plans to celebrate with Jessica and Michael following my successful interview. But beyond the practical conflict, I recognized the importance of establishing new patterns of interaction from the outset. "I'm available to meet at Riverside Coffee this Saturday at noon," I offered instead, a public setting, neutral ground. The silence that followed spoke volumes. My father was unaccustomed to having his suggestions countered with alternatives rather than immediate accommodation. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Saturday at noon, Riverside Coffee." Each word seemed to cost him considerable effort. "We'll be there." "Good, I'll see you then." I ended the call before he could attempt to reassert control over the interaction. A small action, but a significant one in the context of our historical patterns. For the first time in my adult life, I had set the terms of our engagement rather than conforming to their expectations. Saturday arrived clear and mild, a perfect spring day in Philadelphia. I arrived at Riverside Coffee precisely at noon, choosing a table near the window, but positioned to allow easy exit if necessary, a small strategic decision that reflected my new approach to family interactions. Prepared but protected. My parents entered together, their expressions a study in carefully maintained composure. My mother had dressed with her usual understated elegance, my father in the business casual attire he considered appropriate for weekend engagements. They spotted me immediately, their steps hesitant as they approached. "Lauren," my mother began, leaning in for her customary cheek kiss. I accepted the gesture without initiating further physical contact, a subtle boundary that did not go unnoticed. "Thank you for meeting us." They settled into the chairs across from me, the table between us like a demilitarized zone. A server approached, and we ordered the mundane ritual, providing a momentary reprieve from the tension. When the server departed, silence descended. My parents exchanged glances, a wordless communication perfected over decades of marriage. Typically, I would have rushed to fill this uncomfortable void, to smooth over the awkwardness with questions about their week or comments about the weather. Today, I simply waited. My father cleared his throat. "Lauren, your mother and I have been doing a lot of thinking since what happened at your apartment. We had no idea you felt so overlooked," my mother added, her voice tinged with genuine confusion. "We've always been proud of your accomplishments. Pride without recognition or celebration isn't particularly meaningful," I replied quietly. "It's like having a diamond, but keeping it in a drawer where no one ever sees it." My father frowned slightly. "That's not fair, Lauren. We've supported your education, attended your graduations. Some of them," I corrected gently but firmly, "when they didn't conflict with Emma's activities. And even then, the support was often perfunctory at best." We didn't realize you were keeping score, my father said, a defensive edge creeping into his tone. Not keeping score, I replied calmly. Keeping track of patterns, of consistent messages about where I stood in the family hierarchy. My mother reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of touching mine. Lauren, we never intended to make you feel less important than your sister. You were always so independent, so capable. Emma needed more attention, more guidance. The familiar justification reframing their differential treatment as a response to our inherent qualities, rather than acknowledging their role in shaping those very qualities through years of reinforcement. Did it ever occur to you that I might have appeared independent and self-sufficient because I learned early that depending on you for emotional support was futile? I asked, keeping my voice level despite the weight of the question. That I became capable out of necessity rather than natural inclination. My parents exchanged another glance, genuine discomfort evident in their expressions. This level of direct confrontation was unprecedented in our family dynamics, where difficult truths were typically glossed over with platitudes and deflections. We never thought of it that way, my mother admitted, her voice small. Our coffee arrived, providing another brief respite from the intensity of the conversation. I watched steam rise from my cup, gathering my thoughts before continuing. I'm not here to assign blame or extract apologies, I said finally. What's done is done. But moving forward, I need you to understand that our relationship will be different. I won't be accepting the role I've played in this family any longer. What does that mean exactly? My father asked, his businessman's mind seeking concrete terms. It means I won't be the perpetual support system who gives endlessly without recognition. It means I expect my achievements and needs to be valued equally with Emma's. It means I'll maintain boundaries about what I'm willing to give emotionally, financially, and practically. My mother's eyes filled with tears. It sounds like you're cutting us off. I shook my head slowly. No, I'm redefining the terms of our relationship. I'm open to having you in my life, but as equal participants in a healthy family system, not as people who view me primarily for my utility. This is about the money, my father said, his tone hardening. The notebook, the loans. The money is a symptom, not the cause, I corrected. It's a tangible manifestation of a pattern where my resources, whether financial, emotional, or temporal, were consistently expected to be available for family needs, while similar expectations were never placed on Emma. We've always intended to repay those loans, my father insisted. That's not the point, I replied, frustration creeping into my voice despite my best efforts. The point is that you took my support for granted while celebrating Emma for achievements that required no sacrifice. A silence fell between us, heavy with decades of unacknowledged dynamics. My father stared into his coffee cup. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I waited, giving them space to process what I had said. We've made mistakes, my mother finally acknowledged, her voice trembling slightly. We never meant to hurt you, Lauren. We love you. Both of you. I know you do, I said, softening slightly. But love without respect or recognition isn't enough. Not anymore. My father looked up, meeting my gaze directly. So where does this leave us? What happens now? I considered the question carefully. That depends on you. I'm setting boundaries, not severing ties. I'm open to building a healthier relationship, but it will require real change, not just temporary adjustments to placate me, until things return to the old patterns. And what about Emma? My mother asked. She told us she's planning to travel, that she quit her job. Did you encourage her to do that? The question revealed how deeply entrenched their perspective remained, the assumption that any disruption to the established family system must originate with outside influence, rather than genuine internal change. Emma makes her own decisions, I replied simply. Just as I do. Just as you do. Our conversation continued for another hour, oscillating between moments of genuine connection and frustrating retreats into old patterns. By the time we parted, no dramatic resolution had been reached, no tearful group embrace sealed a perfect reconciliation. Instead, we had achieved something perhaps more valuable, an honest acknowledgement of the dynamics that had shaped our family, and a tentative agreement to try a different approach moving forward. As they left the cafe, my mother turned back briefly. Emma mentioned you might be moving to London for a job opportunity. It's a possibility, I confirmed, not elaborating further. She nodded, a flicker of something like pride crossing her features. You've always been exceptional, Lauren. Sometimes we forgot to tell you that. The simple acknowledgement offered without qualification or comparison felt like a small miracle, not a complete transformation, but a beginning, a recognition that change, while difficult, was possible. I remained at the table after they left, watching the afternoon light play across the river. The conversation had been exhausting but necessary, a clearing of old debris to make room for new growth. Whether that growth would flourish remained to be seen, but I had planted the seeds with clear intentions and firm boundaries. My phone buzzed with an incoming email. The sender was the Richardson Project Selection Committee. My heart raced as I opened it, scanning quickly through the formal language, until I reached the crucial sentence. "We are pleased to offer you the position of Project Development Lead effective June 15th. London. A new beginning. A chance to define myself on my own terms, in a context entirely separate from the family dynamics that had shaped so much of my identity." 2 months later, I stood at the gate in Philadelphia International Airport, my carry-on suitcase beside me as I prepared to board my flight to London. My checked luggage contained carefully selected essentials for my new life: professional clothing for my role at Richardson, comfortable attire for exploring my new city, a few meaningful books and photographs, and nestled safely among my most precious possessions, my grandmother's silver bracelet, her journal filled with wisdom and insight, and a small framed photograph, not of my entire family, but of Emma and me at Riverside Coffee, taken the week before when she had come to say goodbye. In the image, we were both smiling genuinely, our faces alight with the possibilities that lay ahead: her journey of self-discovery, my new professional chapter in London. She had surprised me with a parting gift, a beautiful leather journal embossed with my initials. The card had read simply, "For writing your own story on your own terms. I love you, E." The gesture had touched me deeply, evidence of a new understanding between us, a relationship built on mutual respect rather than competition or resentment. My parents had driven me to the airport, another small miracle. They had been tentative but sincere in their farewells, my father awkwardly expressing pride in my achievement, my mother pressing a small envelope into my hand with instructions to open it on the plane. Our relationship remained a work in progress, the patterns of decades not easily undone in a few short months. But change had begun: subtle shifts in how they spoke to me, how they acknowledged my decisions, how they respected my boundaries. The gate agent announced the beginning of boarding. I gathered my belongings, preparing to embark on this new chapter. As I stepped toward the jetway, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. Not because everything had been perfectly resolved, not because all wounds had been magically healed, but because I was moving forward as myself, whole, worthy, and free. On the plane settled into my seat as we prepared for takeoff, I opened my mother's envelope. Inside was a small silver charm in the shape of a key, along with a note in her elegant handwriting. "Lauren, this key belonged to your grandmother's first office at the university. She gave it to me when I graduated college, though I never fully understood its significance. I think it was always meant for you, the one who truly inherited her brilliant mind and determined spirit. May it open doors to a future as exceptional as you are. With love and newfound admiration, Mom." I attached the charm to my bracelet, watching as it caught the light filtering through the airplane window. A perfect symbol for this moment, a key from the past opening doors to a future of my own creation. As the plane accelerated down the runway and lifted into the sky, Philadelphia receded beneath me, not erased from my life, but transformed into just one part of a much larger landscape. Ahead lay London, the Richardson Project, and countless possibilities I had yet to imagine. I smiled, a sense of profound peace settling over me. Whatever came next, whether reconciliation or continued separation from my family, professional triumph or unexpected challenges in my new role, I would face it as myself. Not as a supporting character in someone else's story, but as the protagonist of my own. I touched my grandmother's bracelet one last time, feeling its link solid and reassuring against my skin. "Thank you," I whispered, though whether to my grandmother, to Professor Jenkins, or to some larger force that had guided me to this moment of liberation, I couldn't say. The late afternoon sun caught the silver, sending brief flashes of light dancing across the tray table, small, brilliant reminders that even after standing in shadows for so long, I had finally stepped into my own light.